Hi, welcome back to the Nobodies Project Season 2. This is a podcast where I interview creatives about their passions, about the things that excites them, their inspirations, even their ruts, some of their struggles, where they even find time to do their art. In this episode, Season 2, Episode 3, I talked to Yasmeen. She's a filmmaker, started as an actor, does some photography, and everything in between. She's told some extremely vulnerable stories about herself. And I met her through Carly, a Season 1 guest, where she was doing behind-the-scenes photography. Welcome back to the Nobodies Project. We have Yasmeen. She's a filmmaker, a photographer, and kind of you do a lot of different things.
I do a lot of different things. Filmmaker, photographer, writer, director, actor, everything that you could ever need me for, I can do it.
Yeah, I love it. So the first question I always ask is, what do you do for money? And then what do you do for art? Because sometimes that differs.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do get to do our art for money.
Yes, absolutely. So what I do for money is I'm a bartender.
Nice.
So I'm slinging drinks. And for art, I kind of do a lot of things. I started out as like a film photographer, mostly doing portraits, and then now I'm kind of a filmmaker through like meeting people and like just being like, hey, I can do that, and then I did it, and here we are.
Yeah. You said kind of filmmaker. Do you not consider yourself?
I guess I have such a hard time being like, I am this. I am a filmmaker. I am, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough, because I feel like self-promotion is so tough.
It's really hard.
Do.
Yeah.
And I remember even when I was getting interviewed by Hank in the last season, it's like, I don't want to talk about myself that much. And it's like, I kind of have to brag right now.
It's
kind of like a job interview where it's like you have to show off all these things, but at the same time you're like, you have that imposter syndrome.
Absolutely.
Kind of going on.
Yeah.
We can start there too. How much of imposter syndrome do you have when you're like making a film or doing photos, or is there anything you're 100% confident in?
I feel really confident in my ability to take portraits.
Okay.
And that is like the most confident I think I will ever be, because I feel like filmmaking is so vast and like such a different beast, and there's so much that you learn, especially in indie filmmaking too. And I'm still, as they say, green. I'm pretty green. So I'm still learning so much from everybody, like everywhere.
Yeah. How long have you been doing it, and where are the inspirations coming from? Do you have like favorite directors, or is there like certain movies? What kind of genres are you in? Because I look through some of your stuff and I can kind of get a sense of it, but I'd love to hear more.
So my whole shtick is like, I love relationships. I love exploring relationships, whether it's a family relationship, a platonic relationship. I'm not so much into like romantic relationships in like writing or in movies. I'm more into like the really complicated relationships between like friends and sisters and like parental relationships. And I think that is very much my core, just because of like things that I've dealt with in my life. And I think it's important to talk about, but some really good movies that I love are Kajillionaire. I don't know if you've seen that. It's by Miranda July.
I've heard of it.
It is so good. It is so good. I think Minari is also a really good example of like a family relationship that I really appreciate looking at. Because I think no matter what, a child and parent relationship you can relate to no matter what. Let's see. Celine Sciamma.
Okay.
So Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It's really good. Girlhood is really good. Have you seen any of these?
No.
No?
No, I'm not.
I was like, I hope you know some of the things I'm talking about.
I feel really bad. I'm like, I want to relate, but I just haven't seen a lot of those.
Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. You've seen that one.
Of course I've seen that one.
Okay, so that one is a good one too, because it's like all about the mother-daughter relationship, and like also the relationship between, I forget their names, but the mom and dad too, and like exploring that and like just all of that complicatedness. I love that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's been a nice shift of like the rom-com kind of going away and being less focused on just like boy meets girl and that whole thing. And it's honestly a good evolution of just getting into more interesting things. But I love the bit about the parental thing, because even everybody inherently, even if, you know, unfortunately somebody walks out or something, there's still a relationship there, and how you deal with that. And I wanted to ask about the one film you are making, the comedy one that's going to the estranged mother's funeral. Is that the one you're currently working on? Because that one of all your projects seems the one I was like, oh, I'd love to see this movie.
Yeah, so it's called Late to Mom's Funeral. I'll give you the whole
do it.
The spiel. So it follows two sisters, Maya and Hope, as they show up unannounced to their mom's funeral. And basically, as you follow them meeting their family again, whom they haven't seen for like a minute, you kind of are meeting these really eccentric characters who are Southern, who like don't really care, kind of like whatever. And you learn through people's eulogies that their mother was kind of a bad person. But they're talking her up like, oh, she was so cool, she's a partier, you know. And so Maya goes up there and basically is like, she actually sucked, and you guys are just kind of lying, and this is terrible. And she basically just like sets the record straight. And that's like essentially the whole thing. It's like you meet these characters, and Maya is more of like an introverted person who's like a people pleaser who doesn't want to cause any conflict. And at this point, like, this is her last time to really kind of say something. And so she's like, you know what, like, I'm gonna say something and whatever. And that's kind of like the whole premise about it. A lot
of themes of like things you wish you could say to people.
Yes.
Do a lot of these stories with the relationships, are you drawing on just inspiration or personal or?
Okay. So a lot of it is personal because I don't know how to write anything that's like not super personal.
Write what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is like personal experience, but like my mom is still very much alive. But my dad did pass away in 2018. So I have like that grief to draw on. And like when someone like that passes away, you can kind of feel so angry. And like you don't know how to express that. And the best way for me personally was like just writing characters that were able to express themselves. And I also draw on inspirations like Steel Magnolias is like a really great movie. I think that's a beautiful film. Fleabag. I think that she is so funny, and then also you kind of realize there's so many layers to her character, because she is kind of, can I curse on here? Okay. Yeah. She kind of is like a piece of shit, but there's like layers to it that you really are kind of rooting for her in the end.
Yeah.
And then I was gonna say, what else? I relate to a lot of female characters who are just like wanting to say something but they feel that they can't. And this film was like me being able to be like, I'm gonna fucking say it, like whatever.
Yeah, I love that. It also kind of relates to how Carly talks about Night Shift.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about some of your involvement in that, because actually how I ended up linking up with you was through Carly through Night Shift, because I saw some of your behind the scenes photos, which were excellent, by the way. I absolutely love going through those. The set design there is just on a different planet. It's so cool. So tell me about your involvement with Night Shift and how you got there, because are you strictly like, are you a horror person?
I'm not. I really am not.
You kept talking about how like all these movies that I haven't seen, Carly was way worse. Like I at least know the movies that you're talking about and what they're about. Carly's, I was like, I hate scary movies, but I'm so endlessly fascinated by them.
Yeah, I am not like a scary movie, horror movie like junkie. I do like watching every once in a while. I think the most recent one I watched that was kind of like campy was Teeth. Do you know Teeth? Oh my God, it's something to watch.
Producer Bradley's giving a nice
yeah, he's like, okay, so he knows what I'm talking about.
It.
Okay, yeah, that one's like pretty like good to watch. It's not like the best movie, but it is a very like fun thing to watch, and it's very like good for her in the end. You know what I mean? Yeah. But with Night Shift, I would say I remember Carly posting about it, like if anybody wanted to read the script, like months and months and months ago, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to read the script. And I read it and I was like, oh, this is so dope. And I was like, how can I be a part of this? And I basically was just like, I will do photos. I will do them. And I will do them for like nothing if you want. It's just, I really want to be a part of this project. And also seeing everything come together too, like all of the lighting design and the production design, like everyone was working so hard.
Yeah.
And most of them it was like overnights.
Well, yeah.
Which is
I saw a
hard.
lot of the casting calls were like, oh, it's from 10 p.m. on. Yeah, or 8 p.m. on. And I was like, oh, wow.
Which
okay.
is rough.
Yeah.
It is definitely rough.
In October as well. It's not like it's warm.
No,
either.
it's definitely very cold.
Yeah.
And we were filming at Skyline, the diner, and just like the
Beautiful
whole
set.
seeing everything to come together was truly amazing. And that's how I got involved. I was just like, I am going to insert myself. Please let me in.
Yeah. You actually brought up an interesting point about I'll do it for very little, no pay. How's a question that's always interesting, especially with those who I'm sure filmmaking and all that, you know, there's some money involved, blah, 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 but it's not your main money maker.
Yeah.
How would getting paid for your art affect your art? Do you think it would be just a huge relief and awesome, or getting paid a lot of money, would it kind of muddy it, like the passion of it all?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I would really love to just be paid to do the things that I like doing.
Yeah. Not
Not to say that I don't like bartending.
Right.
I just don't like working in the service industry because people are like kind of terrible.
Yeah.
I would love to be paid to do what I want to do, not what I'm just like signing on to do, like a bunch of commercials or stuff like that, more like narrative stuff. But I think everyone knows that there's not a ton of money in like indie narrative stuff. No, there's not.
even at the highest level, there's not a lot.
It's like you're like pinching pennies together.
You're
like,
doing it to get something else.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Unfortunately, at least money wise, not the actual filmmaking wise.
Yes, yeah. I will say too, like whenever I talk to people who aren't like filmmakers in like they're just not filmmakers, like they're just regular
just
people.
normal people.
Yeah, just normal people.
Just these
yeah.
normal
yeah.
people.
These normies, you know. They're like, oh, so where can I watch it? Or where are you? Can I see it anywhere? Like, where am I gonna like sell it? And I'm like, I don't think you guys understand that this is not gonna make any money.
No. You don't understand. I pay money so that festivals
Yes.
will look at it.
Yes, absolutely.
And maybe give me an award.
Or usually they will not even like put me in, and then I just wasted money.
Yeah, and thankfully they're so cheap to
I
apply
know,
to.
they're
So cheap.
Yeah, they definitely don't cost like $50 a pop, or like more than that, honestly.
Yeah, just
sometimes.
so some people see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't understand that too, is that it's not going to make any money. I'm doing this because I want to do this.
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of unpaid labor like for myself because I want to make this happen. And I am just like, I would love to get paid to do this though. That would be sick.
Yeah, it's such an interesting balance because I feel like art gets sometimes a bad rep. I feel like, you know, graphic design and filmmaking, all that, it's like, well, you love doing it, so you shouldn't have to get paid. It's like, yeah, but it's the thing that I trained to do and trained to do all this stuff, and I have all these specialties. Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, like, where did you start? Were you always making films, or did you find a camera late, or? Yeah,
so I guess my first real introduction into film, I wouldn't say Portland film actually. My first introduction to film was I was an extra on this really like terrible reality show that was filmed in Portland. It was like a tattoo competition that was like a 6-hour competition, but they like kept us there for like 10 hours and we weren't allowed to sit down. We weren't allowed to like be on our phone at all. We had to just keep walking around. Truly terrible.
That was extra on a reality show?
Yes. I forget what it's called, but it's like, it was part of like Ink Master, but it was like a spin-off show.
Yeah.
And that was my first real like introduction.
Okay. And you were just like, reality shows are my passion.
Yeah, I was like, I love this so much. Yeah. It's so awesome. And getting paid like $70 to stand all day, that was sick.
It's a whole festival right there.
Yeah. But my second introduction into it, which I think was a lot more conducive to like actually meeting people, was being an extra on this film called Sophie Jones, which was filmed in Portland, and another local filmmaker, Jessica Barr. Like she wrote it and everything, and that was like my actual introduction into seeing like relationships and building more of like a network and meeting more people. So I started out as an actor.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because as we were setting up, you're like, I don't like being in front of the camera. And
yeah, well, this is like so personal. I feel like it's like, oh, you're interviewing me. I'm not like just a person or a character that's performing.
Right.
You know?
You have to be you. You can't pretend to be somebody else.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so I was an actor originally, and then I got cast in this film called Fence Sitters, which was done by PSU, and it was a whole feature film that we did it over the summer in 2019, and I was working full time too, which I would really not recommend to anyone. It was really terrible. And I met so many filmmakers from that. And then my friend Emma, who's also a filmmaker, she did like Bury Your Fish and some other films as well. She kind of helped me get into like writing, because I was like, oh, I could maybe write something. And then she's like, oh, why don't you use this program? And she kind of helps me like figure out like the actual writing process a little bit too.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, the actual writing of scripts and like getting that whole technical thing down is very annoying to me, and that's why I let my buddy Kyle do it all for me. He's very good at that. But yeah, that's interesting. So what would be like a dream project? So obviously you're still pretty green about everything, but still have a pretty impressive resume as all the things I've seen on your website so far. But still going forward, like what would be like a dream, like working with blank director, or like what movie would you love to make if you had the budget?
Yeah, I mean, Late to Mom's Funeral is a short, but I'm planning on making it into a feature. I ideally have made a promise to myself that I want to shoot this feature either before I'm 30 or by the time I'm 30, I'm shooting it. I would love to have a budget and just people behind me that are wanting to support it. That's like my ideal project. But ideally in life, I would just love to be working on films full time, helping either in production or doing some post-production, just like anything. I would love to be a part of anything. Just
absolutely love the industry. Like, just being involved in it.
And that might be because I'm still really new, so maybe later down the line I'll be like, oh, this is kind of
I hope not.
some
I hope
wear and tear,
stays.
you know?
Yeah.
But I would just love to work and be around filmmakers, because I feel like a lot of creativity stems from that too, being around other people who are like-minded.
100%. And you said, because one of the biggest things, and I've mentioned it a couple times, is Bradley pulled me into a meeting where like basically we called it artist accountability. Yeah. Because I picked up on you saying like, it's a promise to myself. So how do you keep yourself accountable? Or is it, like you said, working with other people and they're doing other stuff, so you want to do your stuff? They're asking you about your projects. How do you
I think
balance it all?
Like makes me like really productive and like keep going is either when I get rejected or seeing other people do really well. Because I'm like, they're doing...
Sounds a bit spiteful, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. I really thrive on spitefulness a little bit, to be quite honest.
I love that.
I mean, when I see other people in the community like doing big projects or they're doing really well, I'm like, I want to do that. So I'm going to do it. And I have my producer, Megan, who's also my friend, who kind of keeps me honest and is like, you need to be working on stuff. Like, you need to be working, you need to be writing, you need to be doing this and that. And I'm like, you are so right. I should be doing that.
So you have that accountability.
I do a little bit, yeah.
Which is, I think, super crucial. That's how me and Kyle work as well. As he's like my writing partner with that. I push him a bit, and then he'll come back with a bunch of stuff. Yeah, and it's a good relationship to have. But talking about, and spitefulness sounds negative, but I understand what you're saying.
I think it can be positive, though.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Going off that, how is social media and Instagram plays into imposter syndrome? Because I do the same thing. I look at other people doing big projects and I'm like, I should be doing that. What is going on? And then how do you balance that and like the following? Because I know that with some films, getting funding, all that stuff is a huge part of it.
Yeah, that part is really hard, because I try to tell myself this too, is that everyone is posting the best version of what is happening in their life. Because I don't think it would be great if everyone was posting all of their business that is like not fun and not happy. So that is really hard, because I have to take everything with a grain of salt. And I think being like the age that we are, like we are on social media constantly, and like that's how we get our name out. That's how people like reach out to us. Like you reached out to me on Instagram, right? And that's like how we are like promoting ourselves. And I feel like that can be really detrimental, especially to like my like confidence when I'm seeing other people do so well.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I just have to remember that we're all like doing our best.
I love that. Yeah, it's very cute. that we're just all trying out here. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna say that I was talking to my friend who is a filmmaker who's always like, she always looks like she's doing stuff. She's really busy. She's getting projects done. And she's like, I'm faking it. Like everybody is faking it. Like we're all faking it. And I was like, thank you so much for that. I needed it.
Yeah. Oh, that's massive. Because I do the same thing. I have a buddy, Leon, who just seems to be doing like some of the coolest stuff. And then I'll reach out. He's like, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm wasting my days away. Like, and I do the same thing. People say that to me. It's like, oh, you have so many projects going on. It's like, I look at my phone for 4 to 5 hours a day. Like, I'm not productive. I'm not as productive as you think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's it's such an interesting balance with that. How do you balance like doing the photography stuff and the filmmaking? Because it sounds like filmmaking is where the passion really got you there. But is photography something that you want to pursue, or is it just like a fun thing that you're very good at?
You know, at first it was something that was like my first real introduction into like, I think filmmaking in general, because you're making stills, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And you started with, you said film photography as well, right?
Yeah, I took a class.
Brutal, but yeah.
I took a class. I feel like film photography is the way to start because you learn so much about just like photography in general,
I
right?
know. That's what our photographer is like, yeah, you should have done that. And I was like, no, I like the safety net.
You learn so much about the camera just from like doing film and like all of the developing process. Like everything comes together. Like I think is the best way to learn. But I started with film, like developing it and printing it in a dark room. Oh, like I had a class that I was in college for, and I just fell in love with it. And I was like, oh, I want to do this. And then I took a break for like 6 months, and then I picked it up again, and I took some pictures like in downtown Portland and like of my friends, just like really casually. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. This is really fun. And then being able to get more like artistic with it and really tap into portraits was really, really fun. It has taken a backseat as of late because I'm just so busy and focused on my film. So it's more of like a hobby now than it was my true passion before.
Right, but it at least served its purpose of like, like leading you into stuff. And also with taking photos, it's such a, like I go on walks and take photos, and it really helps me just talking about like looking at my phone too much, just like see the world and just like really look for those like really like small moments of beauty. And having a camera is the excuse to do it. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, the walk to actually just look around is probably better than the photos.
Yeah,
and just
absolutely.
like leading path into film and stuff.
Yeah, and I really do miss like taking photos all the time of people, and I think because of like the pandemic that has shifted how I do things so dramatically, because I would just like talk to people and be like, hey, do you want your photo taken? Yeah. And like I was doing everything out of my own pocket, which is crazy. So that's why I had so many photos too of like so many portraits of people, because people love, like, I love taking pictures of people and making them feel good. Yeah. And like have photos that they can use like professionally or just like for fun. Like I think that is such a confidence booster too, is to have like a good photo of yourself.
Oh, huge.
But then I had like no money to do anything else because I was just devoting all of my money to like film and developing and stuff like that. So
film, talk about expensive. Holy crap.
It's so expensive now. Like,
but yeah, I really love how many threads about like it all kind of comes down to like humans and like their stories they want to tell you, whether it even be a portrait. Yeah. But we were just talking about our like mainly me, my sense of like needing control.
Yes.
And about this podcast. But how does that play into like your filmmaking? Are you somebody who you have such a clear vision and you know this is the story you need to tell, or are you more lax about it? Depending on the project, probably.
Yeah, it really depends on the project. The first film that I ever did that was like my film, I was a co-director because I was also acting in it. Nice. And I felt like I was not in control. And I am such a person that is like, I want to make sure everything looks good. I want to edit it myself. I want it to be exactly how I want it to look. And so for this project, I have complete control, which is a good and a bad thing.
Yeah, because now there's pressure on you.
Yes.
Because I'm in the same boat where I want it all to look amazing, but also that I'm like, but can I? Do I have that ability? Like, what if I fuck it up? If I fuck it up, it's all on me. But I kind of like that balance of like, I'll take that. Oh, I'll fuck it up.
Yeah. I am kind of thinking in a way that I'm like, I simply just cannot fuck this up. I do not have the capacity to fuck this up. I have to make it happen. That's just kind of like how I am going about it and being a director, because this is like, I am going to be the director and that is me. And I'm not co-directing it this time, so I have a lot more control, and I want to edit it too, because I just want, this is going to sound crazy, I think.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I need control, but I really do want to just make it like how I see it, you know?
And I think there's like a misconception, because I could not really do more. There's a misconception, and maybe we're just like, you guys don't understand, but where somebody would say like, oh, you have a huge ego or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, it's that I want to put my name on things I'm really proud of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm totally down to work with people, but I know what I want it to look like.
Yes.
And having that confidence in yourself. The flip side of that is, I think what people don't understand is like, yeah, you have ego, you have confidence about doing all that stuff, maybe arrogance. It's like, yeah, but I also have that imposter syndrome, like where during the edit, I'm like, should I even fucking be doing this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, yeah, but that balance is so interesting. You talked about like you need this project to happen. Like you're like, I'm going to will it to happen. It has
absolutely.
to. Can you talk about one of your like favorite projects or project in the past that you were so stoked on that just maybe didn't get the right reception, or it didn't come out the way you wanted to, even though you were so excited about it?
Yeah, I will say my first film, Run Through It, which is so like embedded with my own personal struggles with like dealing with grief. I was obviously like, I wrote it and I was co-directing it, and I had all of the pitch deck ready and the characters, and it was so me. But it just didn't turn out exactly the way that I thought it was going to. So that was a little bit disappointing for me, and I can't like really watch it. I'm going to be honest. It was at the Oregon Short Film Festival. And I think it won an award too, but
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, it won an award. It was funny enough, best relationship drama.
Yeah.
But I wasn't able to go because I just like could not afford to come to Portland and just for like a weekend, because I was like, I have work and I need to pay rent and all of these things.
Yeah, I also think you might be our first non-Portland you grew up here, so it's you're a Portland artist to me, at least. Yeah. But like you're the first one that's not based in Portland, which is interesting. But going back to that project, like you can't watch, like how are you with going back through your old even like photos? And because me and Molly do it often, where we look back at how far we've come.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's fun to look at it, but I would hate people to see it.
Yeah, I think with photos, it's a little different for me because I can see so much growth.
Yeah. And
I don't think the photos I was taking before were like bad photos. I think they were just kind of they were just like meh. You know, they're okay, like whatever. But with filmmaking, like the first film, I'm not necessarily embarrassed about it. It's just, it's so much of me that I think I'm basically putting myself in a film, and people are going to learn a lot about my own trauma from that film specifically. And I actually recently watched it like during, like a few months ago with like a bunch of people, because they were like, oh, I want to see the film. And I was like, okay, finally, I'll let you watch it. And then I was watching it with everyone, and I was like, wow, what a terrible idea this was. Because I do not feel good about this. But it's not like embarrassing because it like looks bad or anything. It's just, it was too personal, and it wasn't exactly what I wanted to say. And I think the editor did a good job, but as I said before, I want to have control. Yeah. So I wanted to look exactly how I want it to look.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. Something I was gonna ask about in there was, You talked about how, like, going back and watching it, it's hard and it's like a big part of you.
Yeah.
Is there some like freedom now that you're like your very first thing that you made is such a big part of you, instead of like here, because I've heard from other people like, oh, I want to tell my story, but they tell all these other stories first, and it's kind of like hiding behind it. Do you feel a sense of freedom from like being that vulnerable on the first go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I wouldn't be able to make the film that I'm making right now without having made that first one.
Right.
And I'm not afraid. I love being vulnerable. I love talking about my emotions. I feel like I'm a person that feels really deeply, and I'm not going to hide that. And so I think with any of my work, there's always going to be a sense of vulnerability. And I love talking about it. But this project is fiction, so that one feels a lot better.
Okay.
Even though there is a lot of me, and it's still like in like bits of the characters, or just like even bits of like the storyline. It's still a fiction, but there's still that sense of like these relationships between these people, and it feels vulnerable, and you're kind of seeing this intimate look at this family that is kind of fucked up, right? But I think being able to be vulnerable is also a way that people can relate to you more and be more expressive and be more free with themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that everybody's looking for that connection to be like, oh, I'm seen. I like, oh, I'm not alone in that. I know that was really big for me just as a personal, like with some things I've seen where I've heard, I think I was listening to, even though I couldn't relate to his career at all, like Bo Burnham, he talked about how he would have panic attacks before going on stage, and he thought it was just a performer thing. And then he started talking about it, and he realized that everybody has some of those anxieties. And it's, and that I was like, one of my personal heroes, Bo Burnham, can be like, I'm super nervous and I have anxiety about doing all this stuff. It makes it, you're just looking for that relating thing and making stories, especially like those where haven't historically got the limelight, especially about like non-romantic, which I think is really, really important. I just love to see people really diving into those. Yeah,
and I think seeing like these relationships between these people is really important. And I can say like also I've been watching a lot of The Last of Us.
Right.
Have you been watching it?
No.
No? Oh my God.
I know. Producer Brett, the whole crowd over here is upset
like,
at me.
why are you not doing this?
Is it done? Is it the first season done?
It's not.
Okay. How I watch shows is violent in the sense that I will just watch like 4 or 5 episodes a night, and then I'll just like watch a whole season in like 3 days.
Okay,
so I want to make sure it's done first, because the same thing happened with Game of Thrones. Everybody's like, it's the best, and I'm like, I know I'm gonna love it, but I also don't want to like dedicate like 4 weeks out of my life to only watching that show.
Yeah.
And also, it looks a little spooky.
Yeah.
And I don't do well with the spooky stuff. So.
Okay, I will say I haven't played the video game, but what I've watched so far, because I've been watching it with my partner and he really loves like really actiony stuff, he has been not like super impressed. But what I've been really enjoying is the relationship between Ellie and Joel, and just like seeing that grow. And then you also have all of these underlayers of like trauma from Joel and Ellie's like past too that I'm really enjoying. And I think that's really important to see too, instead of just like all of this, cordyceps, like they're not zombies, they're infected. And seeing all of that too. I forgot where I was going with this.
No, it's great. We can also just get at me for all the things I haven't watched.
Yeah, how have you not seen like all of these?
I know everything. I feel so bad when people I just don't watch a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Even though I'm like, I don't want to potentially waste 2 hours out of my day as I look at my phone for like 4. It's like it's a terrible thing.
I get you, because I also do that, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch a movie, but watching like a 30-minute show for like 4 episodes, I'm like, yeah, I can totally do
easy.
that.
Yeah, I'll do that all day.
But these are like really pop culture things.
I know. No, I'm aware. I'm aware that I'm in the minority there where I should be watching these things. But I don't know. I've been trying to be better about like movies. Shows I'm usually pretty good on, but yeah. All right. Well, we can talk about what we're watching all day, but
yeah, absolutely.
But that is actually an interesting question. Is do you have any interest in making TV, because nowadays, thanks to like HBO, Game of Thrones ushering very well, 45 minutes is basically like a short film every episode.
Yeah.
And I think it's allowing people to have more what people would consider film, like a more serious tone to stuff for TV now.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no idea. I've never really thought about it. Even thinking about shooting a feature that I am writing is like really daunting to me. And so trying to shoot somebody else's like writing feels almost weird and foreign to me, even though that's what a lot of directors do, right? It's like they're shooting a lot of what other people have written. I mean, I think it'd be really cool to do it for like maybe an episode or two, but I think for like a whole season would just be really, really taxing on me. I think it's taxing on anyone, really.
Yeah, and I also think some of the, because I'm with you, some of the control stuff, like being in a writer's room. Yeah. If you're not the showrunner, it'd be tough, and I'd be worried about that too.
Yeah.
So you've never wrote like spec scripts or anything like that for like other TV and stuff?
No,
like that?
I'm very, very green, very new. Even writing right now, like trying to write a feature is like, I feel really difficult because you have all of these ideas of like scenes, but then you're like, how do I weave them all together so this all makes sense? And I've heard many, many times from people that like, your first draft is going to be really terrible.
It's a vomit draft.
Yeah.
Just get it out.
It's terrible. And then you just have to keep working on it and reducing and like figuring out exactly what you're trying to say. I think that's another thing too that's really hard sometimes, is trying to figure out what are you trying to say with the script.
Right. One of my favorite comedians, they talked about how they would write their TV show, and what they would do is, instead of like trying to tell a story, they would think of the moment they want to show and then go backwards from there.
Okay.
So think about your moment first and then write from out. And that's really helped me with that, because if you have that really clear vision of what you want to see happen, instead of going like, okay, we have this story, and then what happens next? And then there needs to be a big climactic thing. That trying to do it formulaic has always been like...
No, it's not. Yeah. I feel like it's not good for me, at least, for like being super artistic. And I think I also forget sometimes that I can just make stuff up. I can like write whatever I want and make stuff up. Yeah. And for some reason
there's no teacher for being like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Which is great. Like, that's the whole point.
I can just do whatever I want. I can write whatever I want, and I can just make complete fantasy and fiction. And I forget that sometimes, because I was like, oh, these have to be real. Like, this has to seem like realistic. And I'm like, well, maybe it doesn't have to be. So
yeah, like allowing yourself to play around with it instead of just drawing from, especially coming from your first film. Like, it must be hard to be like, oh, it doesn't have to be exactly what happened to me.
Absolutely. And I think people who write fantasy and stuff like that I don't know how they even do it. Like, where are they pulling all of this stuff from? You know, because they're just like world building so big. Like Game of Thrones, like, is crazy to me because it's such a very like world building. Like all of that is world building.
I mean, the world building in that is literally the best it's ever, like, anybody's ever done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I thought the same thing about like Star Wars, is that like is like the worlds that they're in is like, it's crazy and all that. And I know, and then I moved to the Pacific Northwest, and I was like, okay, I see some inspiration in the Midwest, a little less. But then you start looking at, and I've seen like on Reddit and stuff where they're like, oh, well, Star Wars stole from this, this, and this.
Yeah.
But there's, as anybody who does creative stuff,
it's like all borrowing.
All borrowing. Yeah. A good artist steals.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Steals from many, not one.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
plagiarism. But going into some of the harder parts about like the creative stuff, you said you like put down your camera for like 6 months, but what was your biggest creative rut that you've ever been in, and how did you get out, or are you still in it?
I would say I'm still in it. I haven't really been doing anything super creative. It's mostly just focusing on like pre-production and all of that, like, fun stuff. Like, it is fun, but like sometimes it's not fun. But I don't know. It's hard to get out of ruts, I feel, for me, because I feel kind of, living in Texas, like I moved there like a year and a half ago. I still feel really isolated from a community there. So it's hard to kind of get out of that. But I will say that I got into a residency last summer in Toronto, and I kind of bullshitted a little bit, you know, because I was like, I really want to go, but I don't know if I'll even get in. And then I got in and I was like, oh fuck, like I need to figure out what I'm actually gonna do, right? But there is like this artist who her name is Francesca Woodman. She passed away like a long time ago, but she did a lot of self-portraiture. And I think just like going out into the world, like going to a gallery or looking at picture books, and seeing stuff like that, I feel really inspired by that. I'm like, oh, I really want to create something like that. So Francesca Woodman did a lot of self-portraiture, which I was like, I am never going to do that because that doesn't make any sense to me. Nope. And also doing it on film is really hard because you can't see anything. Yeah. But then I just started doing it. I think that's the one thing you have to do is like, even if you're in a rut, you just have to do stuff. Yeah. And maybe it's not going to be good, and that's fine.
Yeah, but at least you're doing, like, kind of what I was talking about that other podcast I did. I needed something to do, and it made me feel like, oh, I did something creative today. Yeah. But I'm also interested because we share some similarities with the control thing, and I assume that you're very much the one that, like, gets stuff going, and you're the one, like, reaching out to people a lot. Yes. One of my struggles, I feel like, is I reach out to a lot of people about, like, what they're doing, all their stuff, and, like, getting people involved in projects, and, like, that's kind of my role. But there's nobody like me doing that for me. Right. Yeah. So how is that like motivation and all that? Do you feel like sometimes you're on an island? Sometimes I do. And then I realize that my community is way, way bigger and more supportive than even I feel.
Yeah. I think it makes me sad. Honestly, it does. Like
it's real.
It makes me sad because I feel like, I will reach out to people and I'll be like, I'll do this and this. And obviously like people are busy. Like, if you're an artist, you are grinding. Like, you're probably not making a ton of money and you need to be doing stuff constantly. So you don't have time to be like doing this, and this. And I feel like I also feel that way where I feel like I am always trying to reach out to people, try to set things up, talk to people. And I've actually tried doing this in the past few months with like filmmakers in Austin, but everyone is busy. And every time, because I work full time also, so it's hard for me to kind of be able to do it whenever, you know? Yeah. So it does make me sad, but I just have to remember that it's not all about me, you know?
It's that's a tough one to get to though. Yeah. Because I couldn't relate more.
It's not like, even like I'm being narcissistic, being like, oh, it's all about me. It's like, oh, it's not all about me. Like people are living their lives.
Yeah. No, I know. I struggle with that as well, where I'm always game to do stuff, like always. At any moment, I'm like, I'll drop a hat and go do stuff. Yeah. And then I'm like, why isn't everybody else exactly like me?
Yeah,
and
it's like, why isn't
that's my narcissism showing.
Everyone doing this. Yeah. Because I even felt that way like a few days ago, where even about my project, that a bunch of people are on board and they have been giving me like praise on the script and stuff like that, which is like hard to take. I was just like, I just want feedback. And everyone's like, oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I was like, I want you to say this is bad so I can improve it, please.
Like, what is bad about it? Can you please tell me? Yeah. And even then, be like having everyone say that they are going to be there. I'm still like, are you going to though? I don't know. Like, am I even important enough for this? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%. That's again the imposter syndrome, where the ego and the imposter syndrome kind of balances out. But talk a lot about like how much time that all this stuff takes. You work full time. I work for full time as well, so I can relate. How do you find time to do it? Is it just like the need to do it?
Yeah, or if like, as you said, like, because you have accountability with other people. If I say that I'm going to do something a certain day to someone, I'm like, oh, I have to do this now. Yeah. Because I also don't want to look unprofessional or look bad, which is, I think, what's like the right word for that. I mean, it is like a little narcissistic. Like, I don't want to look bad, but also it's a driving force to keep going and like keep producing stuff. I think bartending full time, because I also do a lot of doubles too, just because that's what we need for the bar. And people are counting on me. I think that's like the main thing.
Yeah. The accountability is huge on that. And just like with creative stuff as well, but in general, it just like seeps into everywhere where, cause I feel that as well. I want everybody to be like happy and like, like, oh, Marky did a great job and he's reliable and all that stuff. So I couldn't relate more. Speaking of like some of the bartending stuff, is there anything that you're like, I would love to make a film about some of the experiences you felt there?
I feel like this is like people have probably thought about this before, but doing a version of like the Office, but with like working at a restaurant would be so good.
Oh yeah.
Because I was talking to one of my friends yesterday about the service industry, and like there is nothing quite like bonding about really shitty people that just like come to the restaurant.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would be really funny, and a lot of people would relate to that. But I'm not so tapped into that like really comedic side of myself that's like full comedy, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, you were just bragging how your partner now finds you funny.
Well, that we weren't recording that. But I do think that I am funny. I just am funny in a way that is not so like happy funny. It's like dark funny. It's
like lobster funny.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yes.
Nice. All right, got one. Cool. The last question I always like to ask is where would you need to be in like your career or anything personally where you could say like I made it, like I did it, I accomplished. It's always sliding, but like do you have a milestone you're looking at, or maybe it's that short film by the time you're 30? What is your one thing like I made it big, I've done it?
I think for a filmmaker, like for me personally, being able to write something, be able to have the time to first write it and then workshop it, and then have someone be like, yeah, we'll make it, let's make it, and then they just give me money to make it, and like that's it. That I feel like that seems so simple, and it's really not. But
having trust of people you respect is
absolutely
huge. I think everybody seeks that in some way.
Yeah, and I think too, because we are doing my short film on not a lot of money, so it's a lot of me asking people, and then also people believing in like the script and the story and wanting to tell it, even though they're not going to be like getting the actual like day rate of like people who work on commercials and stuff like that.
Yeah, so just having somebody basically believe in you, which is it sounds like I'm simplifying it, but it's kind of a nice message.
It really is, because I wasn't even planning on making this film until I sent it out to Megan, who is my producer, because I was just like looking for feedback on it, and she's like, let's just make it. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And she's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, that trust, that believing,
I was like,
love that.
Okay, I guess we could do it.
Nice.
And now we are doing it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
The last thing I want is plug anything you want to plug. Maybe it's like go donate to my, Kickstarter, whatever it is for the film, or follow you on Instagram, or whatever it is. But whatever you want to plug away, feel free. We'll throw some stuff up, and we always do it too. So if you forget stuff, it's fine.
You can follow me at Yasmeen Magar on Instagram, and at Late to Mom's Funeral on Instagram is good. We have a Facebook too. That's just Late to Mom's Funeral short film. And I don't know if this is coming out before we do our Seed and Spark Fund, but if it is, like, donate to our Seed and Spark, that would be sick.
We'll link all that stuff. We did that for Night Shift as well.
Yeah, sick.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you for having me.
Super fun.
Yeah, this
great
is
talking
awesome.
to you. Yeah. Well, bye.
Yeah, bye.
Oh my God. I was like, I don't know how to end these things.